eşyaları gördük. Şimdi direkt olarak evlerle uğraşan birisini görüyoruz. Şu anda danışman olarak çalışıyor, BASF için çalışıyor ama bir zamanlar bu Alman sürdürülebilir binalar sertifikasının başkanlığını yapmış durumda. Bu DNGB biliyorsunuz LEED ve BREEAM'e karşı gelen, karşı demeyeyim de beraber gelen ama Almanların kurduğu bir sertifika programı. Bunun benzerini Türkiye'de ÇEDBİK yapıyor. Beraber ben de onun içindeyim bir yere kadar. Bayağı ilginç şeyler yapmış zaman içinde. Aslında bir inşaat mühendisi olarak mezun oluyor bu Braunschweig Teknik Üniversitesi'nden. 2010'dan beri de kendi danışmanlık firması var. Christian burada yapılardaki malzemelerden bahsedecek ve EKOIQ çözümlerinden bahsedecek. I'm interested in listening to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Got that. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. And have the difficult task now to keep you away from the food for the next, I hope, 20 minutes if I keep myself short. I'm dragging you now back to a meta level a bit, but to take the perspective of construction products. Let me ask you a question. Do you know this kind of product there? That's an insulation material. And I would like to ask you, is this a sustainable product? What do you think? Well, people call me sustainable expert. I don't know. I don't know whether this is a sustainable product or not. Because I don't know what you want to do with this product. And we heard Matthijs van Dijk this morning earlier, and he mentioned that it's so important to know the demand of the building, the demand of the people who live in the building. So before I can answer you the question whether this is a sustainable product, I need to know the building. You can only answer that question in the building context. Because you've got the production. To produce this material, you need resources, you need energy, transportation, and so on. You collect that all, you sum it up, and you balance it. And then you've got the use stage. In this case, maybe you don't use it for a garage that you don't heat, you don't cool it. But you use it for a building that you heat or even cool for the next 50, 80 years. And then you save a lot of energy with it. And there are other impacts too. Think of sound insulation. It's not only energy. Think of emissions that you avoid. And think of the economical impact that it has. And many more criteria, and 20 minutes are definitely not enough here to count them all up. But it's a full story. It's a lot of criteria to be considered. And then you've got the end of life too, and you've got to consider what you have in the end. Can you reuse or use it differently, the product? Or do you have waste? And now I go back to the meta level. I want you to keep what I just said in mind, and if you forget about the rest, I don't care, but you should always think when you see products, you should think of the use. It's different for energy supplies that we just saw, because the use, it's quite defined. So you can say this product is energy saving because you know the use of it. What has changed? Why are we talking about sustainability? We saw this graph in the morning that everybody is talking about sustainability now again. We talked about sustainability 300 years ago, 150 years ago. But what has changed that we're talking now again about sustainability? Well, I think the main reason is that we have an explosion of the global population. And all other problems somehow derive from that or cause that. The latest figures of the UN are that we will reach in 2050 the figure of 10.25 billion people. And as you see here, the blue part are the developed countries. So the part of the developed countries are even increasing. And the developed countries use more energy, use more resources, as we do. So the global population and the global depletion of resources is strictly connected. And I think we really face a problem soon, because Earth is just not enough, one Earth is not enough to supply us all with the energy and other resources that we need. And I think we found out, we understood. So we're talking about sustainability. And of course we're talking about the environmental impacts. Global warming. Some people deny that it's existing. Well, I don't care. The depletion is still there. You can't deny that. And we have a financial crisis worldwide as well. This is a driver for sustainability too. So if you think now of the perspective of a policymaker, then you might think like this, or this graph is actually having influenced the political thinking a lot. It's very small, I know, and probably you can't see it in the back at least. But I wanted to use the original graph from the UN, which McKinsey was doing for them. And it shows the impact of CO2 emission savings, so carbon savings, and the effect that it has on the economical effect. So if you have a green bar, then that means you earn money on time with it. And if you have a red bar, then it costs you money to save that carbon. The width of the bar tells you about the impact it has. Now, I highlighted it a little bit and I read it. Insulation improvements are just down there. Think as a policymaker, please now. Water heating, air conditioning, lighting systems, all in the green area. So people started to ask, policymakers started to ask, what can we do? Why don't we, well, if we want to now reduce our carbon impact, why don't we start there? And they asked the questions, and they found out that the width of the bars of the building sector is even far wider. Why? Because a lot of what's in the energy sector up here is actually used for buildings. To produce buildings, you need energy. It's somewhere up there. But it's related to buildings as well. And if you get that perspective and you ask, how big is the impact of the building sector, then you understand. And these figures are the same in the US. I got them here from the German Ministry of Construction. In the EU, the figures are nearly the same in the Western world. 35% of the greenhouse gas emissions are related to the building sector. 42% of the primary energy use is related to the building sector. And 50% of the waste. Why? Because streets and all the dugout, how do you call it in English actually? The excavation, the excavated material is in there too, so soil. Well, the policymakers ask, is the know-how there? Can we do it tomorrow, now? Yes, we can. The techniques are there, the products are there, we just have to do it. What needs to change? Well, that's then what the EU tried to do. We have to go for an integrated approach. Bring the different disciplines together. They have to work together. Define the demand before you do something. Think of the whole thing, the whole life cycle. And they introduced the life cycle assessment approach for buildings and for products. And this becomes now part of regulations and codes. And let me take you very quick now into some examples of standardization and legislation. What happens in the codes is they call it the second generation Eurocode approach. This means we're thinking now integrated and on the life cycle approach. So you count in economical, environmental, social aspects, and you put it over the life cycle. In the legislation, you know the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, I bet. You know the Waste Framework Directive. Maybe you have heard of the Construction Product Regulation as well, which replaces the Construction Product Directive, introducing now requirements to products on which information needs to be provided to assess their impact in the building context. Complicated again? I make it simple. You see the environmental performance, the 3 columns of sustainability, you know from the Brundtland report maybe. Environmental performance, social performance, economic performance, and you can add the technical and functional performance. And these are the norms, the codes that are on the way in the EU and in the CEN, the Central European Norm. And then there's a framework level, a building level, and a product level. And let me talk now about the product level, because to be able to assess your building, how sustainable is my building, how does it work, to be able to make a life cycle assessment for the building, you need information on the product level. And as long as that's not there, you can just go for measures, some simple measures. So what's the reaction of the market to overcome that problem? You know, rating tools. We've talked about them, certification systems for buildings. BREEAM was the first. The British research establishment came up with the environmental assessment method called BREEAM, 25 years old. LEED from the US GBC, US Green Building Council, was invented nearly 15 years ago and put into market, probably the most spread and most known system worldwide. And why in 2007, why did Germans sit together and founded the DGNB then and came up with another certification system? Because the other systems were so far not in line what the EU was doing with the second generation EU approach, the Eurocode approach, the full life cycle approach, life cycle assessment. And they developed a system then, and I was part of that process. It was very interesting, together with the ministry, so with the government, together with the industry, together with the universities, and came up with a system which is really complex. And it needs data. And it needs data on material performance, ecological impact, think about the global warming potential, the backpack, the carbon footprint, right? But on the energy performance as well, and so on. You can read it here, it's a lot. On the economical impact as well, because you do a life cycle calculation from the costs on the economical side as well. How sustainable is something if you can't pay for it, if it doesn't pay off in the end? Nobody will do it. Homo economicus. And of course you have a social impact. It's always called social impact. Let me say, I'd rather put it social, functional, or technical. If a building is not fit for purpose, if you don't use it, if you're talking about an office building and your people who work there are not efficient, if pupils at school cannot learn because they can't concentrate, it's too hot, it's too loud, they're blended, or it's too dark, or whatsoever, all aspects that need to be defined and that influence the sustainability of a building, because if it's not sustainable, if it's not working, then you tear it down and build something new. That's not sustainable. So there's a format now. I have shown you earlier this quite complex graphics of the standards in the EU, in Europe. And there's one norm, 15804. Those of you who are product suppliers or product producers might have heard of it, because there's now this environmental product declaration which defines a set of data that needs to be provided, that should be provided in order to feed an LCA, a life cycle assessment of a building. And this is how an EPD could look like. There's, in the end, a long description, what had been done. It's even more pages. And then there's a table with the figures, how much energy, how much renewable energy was used per square meter or per whatever unit was chosen, and the global warming potential, and ozone, and acidification, and so on and so on. And all these figures you can then sum up in your building analysis from all the products and put them together, and you get a big life cycle assessment for the building. Very complex story, yes, but I think we have to go for a complex way in order to improve, in order to understand, and not to do what maybe we don't have the electric light bulbs here, these energy-saving light bulbs, who save energy, but I haven't seen a life cycle assessment on these lamps ever. So if we want to really improve and do something good on the long run, then we have to do this exercise, at least for a certain time, until we understood how it works. Now, this is hard to communicate. There's product-specific data in this EPD. There's a this is based on a life cycle approach. Energy is in there. I talked about this emission, the impacts on the various emissions. And you sometimes have voluntary amendments for certain certification systems. It would be easy if all the EPDs now look the same. This is an example here from the German Institut Bauen und Umwelt, IBU, EPDs for various products. You take them, you do your calculation, and that's it. But there's a norm now, but there are different ways on how to interpret it. And in different countries, different organizations, some of them are listed here, come up now with their story of an EPD. And we try to overcome that in the moment by founding a platform which is called ECO, where all these program operators that provide these EPD data, who provide the regulation, the rules, and who verify the data, come together and define common rules to have a harmonized solution for a European EPD. And that's then probably what we need on the product level for a clear communication to be able to improve on the building level. This platform, which is administrated by me since September, was founded in September in Brussels. 16 nations signed the Memorandum of Understanding there, and since then we're working on the details. So what are the indicators, what are the methods behind it, what is the quality management, so that this is really harmonized and you can use it. I would like to ask some of you who are interested and who are active in that field from Turkey to participate in this platform as well, because Turkey so far is not participating here, and I think you should be interested in bringing your input and getting your output on that too. Thank you a lot for your attention, and if there are questions, I'm here.
Thank you very much, Christian. Soru var mı şimdi? One question from the last slide. 16 countries signed a memorandum of understanding. What is your expectation for it to grow? I think it will come in July. Soru şu, burada bir anlaşma var, 16 ülke var. 16 ülke nasıl büyüyecek, nasıl gidecek? Energy Performance Directive, EPD, right? EPD, onu açarsanız, if you open it up, what is it? EPD.
The acronym stands for Environmental Product Declaration.
Çevresel ürün anlatımı. Bunun için oluyor. Bir de and there is another one, Energy Performance Directive, which will be in force starting this July 2012 at the European level. Do you know about that?
Well, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive issues the EPCs, which are the Energy Performance Certificates, but that's something different as the EPDs, because that deals with the energy performance of the buildings itself, the EPC. And the EPD, well, this is all the acronyms, which is quite confusing in the EU, I must admit.
Bir ürünler var, bir binalar var. Onlar için, ikisi için de direktifler var, yeni oluşumlar var. Bu yıl başlayacak, bunlar büyüyecek şu anda. Bununla ilgili sorunuz var mı?
Çok teşekkür ediyorum ben de verilen bilgiler için. Ben Fethi Hinginar, Türkütong'dan. Bu EPD'yi biz Türkiye'de ilk alan kuruluşuz. Geçen yıl İBU'dan aldık. Bu durumda biz bu EPD'nin üyesi, SAP üyesi mi oluyoruz veya nasıl bir ilişki kuruluyor, onu anlatabilir mi?
Clear? Okay.
Right. I guess you are already a member then of EBU. And since EBU is part of the show, you are already connected to it. Anyway, if you want to directly participate, there are different levels of members on the ECO platform. There are the program operators who offer EPDs, or the verification of the EPDs, and who do the rules, the construction product rules, product category rules. These programs are the main drivers of the platform. But then LCA practitioners, like PE International, for example, who's doing the LCAs, life cycle assessments, can participate as well. Associations, European associations can participate, and so on. There are others like the EU Commission and the GBCs, the Green Building Councils, as those who take the information for their purpose. And they sit then in certain working groups and have a mandate to decide for whatever they are asked to provide, what kind of information. So they develop then the common format, the common quality management rules and so on.
Okay. Teşekkürler tekrar. Thank you very much, Christian. Başka sorularınız varsa bundan sonraki konuşmacıdan sonra arada yemekte devam ederiz. Tekrar teşekkür ederiz.